Okay, this is Unit 10, Day 3 of our foldable. We finished everything in our foldable except the very last page here. And in this case, we know the two sides, and I'm looking for one of the angles. So here we have our triangle with our angle A. We've labeled the opposite, the adjacent, and the hypotenuse just like we had last time. And you'll notice sine, cosine, and tangent. This is exactly what we had before. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. This is the same thing we said on the previous page. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And on the page before that we had tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. So it's the same exact formula as we used before. But now we're going to be looking for the angle. So the steps are almost the same thing that we've done before. So we're going to still label opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse on our triangle. We're going to write the correct formula. Then we're going to divide, and we're going to write as inverse and solve. And I'll tell you what inverse means in just a second. So let's start with our steps here on this first one. Here's my angle. So this side is the opposite. Remember, that's the one on the far side over there. And this one is the hypotenuse. So I labeled the parts on my triangle. Now I'm going to write my correct formula. Opposite and hypotenuse is sine. Sine x equals, opposite is 5 over 10. Then I'm going to divide this. This is what I'm going to divide right here. 5 divided by 10 is 0.5. I just did it on my calculator, 0.5. So I've got sine x equals 0.5. Now we're going to use the inverse functions. This is just like 3 squared is 9, but if I want to go the other direction, I say the square root of 9 is 3. So this goes the opposite direction. That's an inverse function. It does the opposite thing. Here we're going to do an inverse function of this to find this part that we were looking for. So it's just like the square root is the opposite of squared. We're going to do the inverse sign of this gives me the number I was looking for. And if you didn't notice, right above the sine, cosine, and tangent buttons are the little inverses. So to do the inverses, you just hit the second and then the same buttons, and it gives us the inverses. So on this one, I'm going to hit second sine, and notice that this time it put in the little -1 for inverse, and I type in 0.5. And it tells me that that angle right there is 30 degrees. Remember, I'm looking for an angle here, so my answer for these are in degrees when I do them. Alright, the next one. Same steps. Label the sides. This is adjacent, opposite. This is hypotenuse. Pick the right one. Adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine x equals 5 over 10. Divide. 5 divided by 10, we get 0.5. Write it as the inverse, so the cosine inverse of this equals x. Type that in your calculator. Second cosine to get the inverse, notice there's the inverse, it's 0.5, and we find that that one is 60 degrees. And finally, the last one, if I know the adjacent and the opposite, here's the adjacent, here's the opposite. Opposite over adjacent is tangent of the angle equals opposite over adjacent. So, divide this, write it as the inverse, and then type it in your calculator. Second tangent 0.5, and we get that this is 26.57. degrees, because remember we were looking for an angle. That's it.